Hi everyone, good morning and good evening depending on which part of the world you are in. My name is Prankur and I represent Zinnov. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you for this exclusive event jointly organized. I would like to thank all of our speakers, attendees, and all of you other people on the call today for taking out the time to be here and contributing to making this a very enriching experience for everyone. Cloud has been established as a technology foundation for businesses worldwide, and the adoption rate is growing at a phenomenal pace. The spend on cloud is expected to cross a massive $1 trillion by the year 2028. While the value that companies can derive from cloud is very clear, the transformation journey has been quite challenging for a lot of organizations. In today's session, we will hear from the experiences of industry experts and practitioners on the common pitfalls, varied approaches that they're taking, and the key elements for success in the journey of cloud transformation. A few points to note before we get started. For those of you on the platform, access the help section for any technical help that you may need. And at any point of time, should you encounter any issues or have any queries, please feel free to drop us a note at events@zinnov.com, and the Zinnov team will help you out as required. I would like to also encourage you to post questions in the Q&A tab on the platform. And for those of us who are joining on YouTube, do post your questions in the comment sections and we will have them answered if time permits. We will also be running interesting polls throughout the session. Do keep an eye for the pop-outs on your screen. I hope all of you have a great time. To kickstart the session, I would now like to invite Vaibhav Gupta, Principal and Practice Head, Private Equity and Principal Investor at Zinnov, for the welcome note. Handing it over to you, Vaibhav.
All right, thank you, Prankur. Am I audible? All right, okay. So welcome everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are and whatever part of the world. This is, in fact, one of the most exciting lineups we have actually seen of speakers in a long time in some of our events, right? You have some really good, interesting speakers coming up, talking about, perspectives on cloud and how cloud has been so essential in the entire digital transformation journey of different enterprises around the world. So today we have speakers from the demand side of enterprises, companies who are actually using and leveraging the cloud technologies. And we also have companies who are providing some of those cloud technologies, infra companies, application software. So just hold your breath for a lot of interesting conversations to come up, right? With that, I would like to just start sharing my screen, and Console, if you can tell me if that is visible. All right. Okay. So if you look at how the cloud, overall has come up, and the overall technology per se of cloud has come up in the last few years. These are some of the basic, Google search trends that we've tracked. And from 2015, you can see in almost all of the, cloud native technology areas, be it around migration, be it around SaaS, hybrid cloud, cloud factory, Kubernetes, serverless computing, and these are just some of the keywords associated with cloud. All of them have seen a huge uptick after 2015, right? Until 2015, I think the push was more from the supply side, so to speak. The companies were developing these technologies, were pushing these technologies into the market. But come 2015, and especially last couple of years, and in fact 2020 has been phenomenal in terms of enterprises now wanting more and more of cloud, right? Wanting to migrate all of their workloads to cloud, thinking about what is Kubernetes, thinking about what is serverless, etc. Right? And then that's kind of is very evident in the search results that, or the search trends that Google. If you just to highlight that point even further, right? If you look at the overall consumption by enterprises, the amount of cloud traffic from an enterprise standpoint is in exabytes. I don't even know how many zeros to put on that, but it's quadrupling, almost every year, right? So that's the kind of pace at which the cloud consumption is increasing, right? If you look at the number of applications any enterprise use today, that is increasing massively, right? So that's kind of another indicator of what's happening in terms of consumption, right? And that, in fact, has given an impetus to all the SaaS companies, right? So if you look at the chart on the right-hand side, the number of SaaS companies post 2010 or 2015 is been phenomenally increasing, right? Doubling almost every 5 years, right? That's kind of an indicator of how these the number of the consumption of cloud is driving the overall upsurgence of the number of SaaS companies, and that's kind of is evident in the market caps of all of these companies and how phenomenally they are increasing as well, right? And we all know the success stories of some of these large SaaS companies, be it Adobe, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, a lot of them, right? With that, basically, I wanted to introduce some of the new frameworks that Zinnov and Persistent has jointly developed. So if you look at how the transition to cloud has been happening, we started mapping out journeys of all the ISVs and wherever they are in their journeys and the stages they are. So this is the Zinnov-Persistent cloud maturity model. We would there is a detailed report on it. We would definitely share it with you all post the event. But basically, this talks about how from a legacy company to being a cloud ready, to being a cloud friendly, resilient, and being a complete, a cloud native company. What are some of the key constituents and ingredients of being at every stage? The detailed white paper that we have also talks about the challenges that you face as you move from one stage to the other. Would definitely recommend a thorough read of this, and we would be definitely sharing it with you all. With that, it brings me to the agenda of the day, and I would pass on the baton to some of the most learned and experienced people in the industry. We have Sandeep Kalra coming in, giving a keynote on business of the cloud. Sandeep is the CEO of Persistent System, a really niche service provider working in the areas of cloud migration, automation, product engineering, etc. And one thing that Persistent has seen under the leadership of Sandeep has been phenomenal stock price growth. Sandeep should actually talk about the secret of how that has been achieved. Almost every other analyst in the market gives a buy rating to Persistent stock, except one of them, which Sandeep would actually love to share. So you should definitely look forward to that keynote. Really good insights that Sandeep was to bring on his experience of helping their customer transition in the journey of cloud. Then we have a panel discussion where you have a lot of folks from the technology world. We have speakers from Red Hat, Kofax, Actifio, which is now acquired by Google. We have somebody from Vista Equity Partners. We have Praveen from Zinnov, who's going to moderate the entire session, right? And this roundtable or this keynote, this panel is going to actually focus on how cloud transformation is happening with the technology companies and what are their challenges, how are they looking at really being the powerhouse of these transformative journeys for their customers. Right? And then we have a very interesting enterprise panel, which is going to focus on how enterprises are adopting cloud and updating their infrastructure in that attempt. We have speakers from Diebold, Honeywell, we have Blue Spear Ventures, we have LI Financial, and Neeta from Persistent is going to moderate that session. So with that, I would pass it on to Prankur. I would pass it on to Sandeep for his keynote. Thank you very much.
I hope, yeah, just 1 second. I'm trying to share my screen. So let me just. So I assume you guys can see my screen. Perfect. Thank you. Vaibhav, thank you for the kind words. And I will try and keep this very short. This is not actually a keynote. This is just a brief segue into the sessions. And we have the most interesting part, which is the 2 sessions lined up after this. So this is just a small point of view on what we see from our vantage point. And as Vaibhav said, we are leaders in digital product engineering and enterprise modernization, where we work with the leading technology companies on one side, help them build their products and take the products to market into the enterprises, and also help the enterprises, cross the chasm of, value creation in this world as it evolves. So if I was to just look at what happened in the last many years, and all of us have seen this journey together, we saw right from industrial companies like GE adopt cloud at scale, where they looked at different kinds of workloads, connected them, even including ERP systems and so on. We saw the Netflixes of this world, come in, and these are the fables of the industry where they use the cloud to pretty much go global. Today, a Netflix of this world is 86 million customers globally, whether you are here in the US, you go to India, you go to Europe, various other places, and the kind of scale that these people saw, the kind of disruption that they made to other people's business models is phenomenal. One could go on and on. One could talk about Kroger competing with Amazon or trying to come up in different manners. Goldman Sachs breaking the different paradigms of banking and so on. So the cloud part has been well proven over the last decade or so. Now, if we look at our macro environment in the last year, We saw COVID-19 come from nowhere. It disrupted all our businesses. A number of our customers, even on the panel today, we saw everyone morph into a different way of working. Everyone look at their revenues, their costs, their business models very differently. And even industry leaders, whether it is Microsofts of this world or the Salesforce of this world, I'm pretty sure you would have seen these statements from their leaders. Everyone is talking about how the digital transformation got further accelerated. When we look at even our customers, when we look at even healthcare companies, the way they are engaging with their patients, even today, people like us, when we talk to our doctors, a number of times those are not in person, but on video kind of calls on platforms like the one we are using today. Banks are talking about no more expansion in physical branches. We have helped a number of banks transform into much more digital, and the roadmap that we are working with them on for the next few years is increasingly more digital. Those are the kind of things that we are seeing, and whether you are from ISV side or an enterprise side, this has significant ramifications, and we are hoping that our panel today will also talk about that. Now, if we look at the forward-looking journey, and even if we look at a Gartner of this world, there's a significant amount of predictions on how now cloud will not just be a part of IT strategy and some business strategy. Cloud will be front and center in business strategy. It is not about whether you will adopt cloud. It will be how, which parts of your business, what goes first, what comes second, and so on. And it's also about how you will create the ecosystems around you so that you can exploit the value of the cloud providers, the ecosystems that can help you accelerate the journey, how you morph your own organizations, right from business to technology and so on. And we are looking at a huge amount of disruption happening in the entire business value chain because of this. Now, if we look at the hyperscalers, whether you are an IBM, whether you are a Microsoft, AWS, or so on, we are seeing a bunch of these hyperscalers come out with different programs, which are basically aimed at bringing even more acceleration. So for example, if we look at IBM is one of our largest customers and partners. They talk about $1 billion cloud enablement fund to accelerate the adoption of their technologies, whether it is their cloud technologies or hybrid cloud technologies like Red Hat. And we'll hear from one of our panel members about that as well as we go along, whether it is Microsoft of this world and so on. On the other side, even the smaller players, which are niche players like a DataStax or a Snowflake, everyone is embracing the ecosystem, and everyone is using the ecosystem to further the cause in terms of adoption, in terms of providing the value that they want to create in the enterprise ecosystem. If we look at how we are also seeing some of the things from some of our customers, so when we look at even a cybersecurity leader that we work with, there's a huge amount of focus on taking the legacy applications into microservices, into containerized kind of architecture, into multi-cloud kind of a thing. And this is their way of future-proofing their own company, being able to provide their platform onto any cloud, whether it is a private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, and so on. Similarly, when we look at even industrial or oil field majors, we are working with one of the leading oil field majors and with Red Hat to take OpenShift as a platform and take this technology provider's platform onto the cloud in a way that it is absolutely agnostic of what cloud, whether it is private, public, and also giving the customer the ability to be able to cope up with the local regulations. So it could be that this cloud could be deployed, or this product can be deployed on a cloud here in the US, could be taken to Middle East, could be taken to Europe, could be taken to India, and so on and so forth. So this enablement of technology that makes it so easy for this technology provider to take their platform agnostic of any cloud, any geography, any regulation is a big value add for them. In a nutshell, if we look at it, it's not a question of acceleration. It's a question of how do you be smart about this whole thing. In our mind, if you look at the strategy, not everything is same when it comes to going to the cloud. Not everything needs to move the first. Not everything needs to move the same way. And that's where we look to the panel to also debate these things. In our mind, what we are seeing is we have to be a little smart about how we prioritize things on the cloud. And it's not about rushing to the cloud and being the first. Second, we are seeing a number of our customers, whether it is enterprises or ISVs, bringing a concept of center of excellence, where you are bringing together a whole ecosystem between a technology provider, your own organization, and a service provider to be able to exploit the key things that everyone brings to your advantage. We are also seeing organizations retain certain core competencies, whether it's an enterprise, retaining the competency on the architecture at times, the procurement of the cloud at times, the security side at times, and so on. We are also looking at everyone, whether you are a product company or an enterprise, talking about DevSecOps, SRE kind of a culture. And that's becoming one of the biggest topics of discussion as far as our vantage point is concerned. Last but not the least, security used to be an afterthought. Today, security is front and center when you design your cloud strategy, whether you are doing it from a product perspective or a IT perspective. Those are the kind of things that we are seeing, and we would hope that the panels, whether the ISV panel and the enterprise panel, will see some discussions on these lines as well. So without much ado, I would want to take a pause. The next two sessions are going to be power packed. We have speakers from various organizations. The logos are on the right. And these are all people who have been in the industry, have seen different facets of business. And we are looking forward to an engaging discussion. And we hope to have discussion areas on the left, right from the adoption journey from the cloud perspective to moving beyond lift and shift and any of the things as best practices and so on. So with that, I will stop here. Vaibhav and Praveen, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandeep, for this very interesting talk. I think it's very clear that this decade will witness almost universal adoption of cloud as a technology element across companies, both on the supply side as well as even enterprises really adopting it in a massive manner. And this sets the stage perfectly for the next session, where we have an illustrious group of 5 leaders from the technology provider world who will bring in unique perspectives of how various technology providers are taking different approaches to provide cloud technologies to enterprises, whether it is in form of SaaS applications, whether it is in form of enabling foundation for cloud for enterprises, and similar support that is being provided from this side of the ecosystem. So stay tuned, and we look forward to this session which is just coming up. I would like to invite Mike Peach, VP and GM Cloud Storage and Data Services at Red Hat, a seasoned industry professional with over 30 years of experience in the technology space. Chris Huff, a veteran from the tech world and currently the Chief Strategy Officer at Ufax. Ash Ashutosh, who founded and was the CEO at Actifio, a company that was very recently acquired by Google. We also have Moro representing Vista Consulting Group. Vista is in fact the world's largest software-focused private equity firm with a portfolio of over 60 software companies. And finally, Manish Chaudhary, the global head of software at Diebold Nixdorf. This session will be moderated by Praveen Balada, the managing partner for emerging tech and private. Praveen.
Thank you, Prankur. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, speakers, for taking out time for this very interesting and contemporary chat, if you will. I think there's so much of buzz around cloud computing these days, and both Sandeep and Vaibhav in their respective presentations did talk about the growing importance of cloud, and specifically due to the COVID-19 situation, right? And if you look at all macro indicators, all market sizes, all analyst commentary, it's very clear that there's been an accelerated adoption by both enterprises as well as ISVs, right? And today in this panel and subsequent to this in the next panel, we'll touch upon how both the ISV ecosystem as well as the enterprise ecosystem is thinking about cloud adoption and what are the nuances, challenges, best practices, sort of a playbook that's emerging in the current situation, right? So without further ado, I'll probably get started. And if I can get started with Ash, actually, from ActiveFlow. Ash, you've been working with your customers both on the cloud side as well as on the data side, right? You've been a key partner in terms of helping them find the right alignment with respect to both data transformation and cloud transformation. Talk to us about why is this space warming up so much, right? And why would 2021 be a lot more exciting than all the previous years that have gone by with respect to cloud and data adoption?
Yeah, thank you, Praveen. So I think it's something Sandeep mentioned at the very beginning. So maybe I start with a very simple thematic thing that happens in all our businesses. Now, let's start with some facts, follow that up with the consequence of that fact, and therefore the need that comes up as a result of this consequence, right? And Sandeep highlighted that. If you saw his 4 buckets, there's one common word that showed up in all those called speed. The speed, and the fact is simple, the speed of our ability to communicate with our customers and deliver services to these customers has grown by 12x in the last 8 years. That's huge. So if you are an organization, doesn't matter whether an ISV or a customer, it has a consequence, and the consequence is simple. It is more important to take a decision faster, right or wrong, than to deliberate and come up with what you think is the right decision. So if that's become part of the speed, that's an integral part of survival, not just thriving, but even just survival. So that consequence drives an interesting thing from a need perspective. What that means is now you need, as an organization, platforms that not only allow you to double down on the right decisions, but also course correct on the wrong ones and do it faster and at a lower cost. That's where the cloud part comes in, right? That's been happening for last, I guess, your numbers showed up in 2015, 2016, and it's only accelerated in the process. So if you think about the thematic story, it's about speed, it's about agility at a lower cost that is driving the adoption. And certainly, I think that 2020 is a fact for everybody. Here we are, being on this very effective call without having to spend a day of traveling somewhere while we get very productive with the rest of the day. Right. That speed, that agility, that's been the focus for why, number one, the enterprise customers, and number two, ISVs like us have had to respond and change. And it's changed in a very fundamental way, and we can talk about that.
Got it. I think you make a very important point about speed and agility being the primary drivers. And what has happened is at Zinnov over the last 3-4 months, specifically towards the end of the last year, right? We started talking to a lot of ISVs and enterprise. While a lot of companies did talk about the growing focus on cloud, there was also a significant base of companies, despite knowing the fact that there's value and they can get speed and it's about agility and all of that, they were still struggling, right? They were struggling either because they didn't know what the right playbook is, or they had some sort of inertia, right? There was a lot of legacy and they just couldn't move the legacy, right? So Mike, if I can bring you in with that context, right? Because you've been helping a lot of those customers, make the switch happen, right? Are you observing these kind of patterns? Is there some sort of inertia still prevailing? What is your advice to companies who are still on the fence with respect to their cloud decisions?
Yeah, so is there inertia that endures? I mean, certainly in pockets, but I think what we've really experienced in the last, certainly since the beginning of the pandemic, if anything, the pandemic just accelerated things that were underway for the last couple of years in terms of cloud adoption. Now, from Red Hat's perspective, from the standpoint of adoption of OpenShift, right, our Kubernetes-based cloud platform, that's been a steady, phenomenal growth for on the order of 5 or 6 years now, right? It started from very small. I've been at Red Hat 8 years. When when OpenShift switched from our own container strategy to Kubernetes and Docker containers, I think that was really the knee in the curve. That was when we started to see the annual doublings. And going into the pandemic, I think like other vendors, all of us thought, this is going to slow things down. Budgets are going to freeze. Folks are going to wait things out and see what happens. In many cases, actually the opposite happened. As we got through maybe a month or two of maybe initial shock, I think many of our customers, both existing and new customers, came to the conclusion that, hey, we need to automate more. We need to as Ash was talking about, we need to make things happen faster because everybody's at home, everybody's online. We don't have all of the delays and lags and latencies of the human latencies of all the travel. The demand to just, hey, I need extra compute resources. I need to do such and such with this application. I need to stand up some new workloads quickly. That has just driven a continued growth, an acceleration of the growth, that is. So what I would say is inertia is on the wane, right? Inertia is, I think it's a critical mass thing where customers, I would say, who were more conservative or more reluctant at first are seeing more and more of their colleagues and, importantly, their competitors adopt the cloud approach and realizing like, hey, I can't be a prisoner to inertia. I've just got to move fast.
Yeah. If I just pick on that theme and kind of blend it with what Sandeep mentioned in his keynote, right? He made a very important comment about cloud being a business imperative, right? And in our interviews with customer, that was one area where companies were wanting to delay the decisions a little bit, right? If you break down the cloud journey in the form of infrastructure, people are ready to take the jump, right? They know that there's value in modernizing infrastructure and getting the value out of it. But the moment you think of the business side of it, right? Cloud, at least the feedback we've oftentimes got is that cloud on its own is not sufficient, right? You need to probably leverage, I think you also mentioned about automation and artificial intelligence is maturing the way it is maturing, etc. Right? So it's really the blending of all of these technologies together which unlocks value and which in turn actually makes it very difficult for enterprises to make the leap forward, right? So quick comments on that, Mike. Is that a challenge or companies have figured out a way to address some of that component as well?
The people aspect is huge. So, we're a technology company, right? We've been immersed in open source technology since our beginning. On a separate plane, in a separate dimension, Red Hat is famous for its culture, right? It's the open, collaborative type of culture, which really derives from those open source roots. We get asked on a regular basis to provide our customers not just with our technology, but hey, how do you do this open thing, right? How does DevOps really work, right? Share us not just the bits, but the actual practices, the human practices that make this stuff all work. Now, we, through our consulting and various other mechanisms, we do try to provide some of that. Our Open Innovation Labs, for example, is an offering on the part of our consulting services organization to help share with our customers some of those practices. But there's a lot of opportunity there, I'll say, just in the industry and the market in general to provide more of that, to provide more of the what are the people practices that it takes to get the maximum possible benefit from from the speed and flexibility benefits of the cloud technology.
Sure. So Manish, if I can bring you in now, and I think you've been someone, your company's been someone who has gone through the inertia, has taken bold bets in digitization and so on, right? How's the transition come by from being a hardware-centric company to a software-centric company? And more importantly, what's been the role of cloud in that journey, Manish? If you can talk to our audience about that, that'll be useful.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Praveen. I think, it all starts with what the clients are looking for. And I think needless to say, every client, especially in the banking and financial services, they're all looking at solving a few things, which is, everyone wants speed of innovation. They want to modernize the technology stack. They want to have the agility to add new payment types, add new functionalities. It's a consistent theme when you see this across. I think it's more predominant in the banking sector. So again, what we do is pretty much what the market transitions and the trends which are going on in the industry. But I think the important point in the industry which we operate is goes to security. And how do you think about security? How do you think about data? How do you think about sensitivity of data? And security in this in our domain actually transcends a little bit beyond just the technology. It goes to compliance and regulatory. It goes to how you manage your data centers. It goes to all of the different checks and balances. And I think that's where clouds becoming very, very important at both levels. One, how do you provide the capabilities to your clients in a fast pace, which is the banks or the financial institutions providing capabilities to their customers. And then second aspect is how do you manage that infrastructure at a scale, at a cost, which is more future proof. Because think about, you're coming from massive investments which have been done in decades and decades, and it's not easy to change those. So I think what I see in our industry is, one, I think every customer is different. There's large banks, there's small banks, there is regional differences. Some have large IT shops, some don't have the large IT shops. So there's no one size which fits all in this space. But the key thing is really to think about where the clients are. Some may need a hybrid solution, some may need a pure public cloud solution. Some really wants to be vendor neutral, given what's really how the cloud infrastructure is evolving, and especially if you have global financial institutions who are operating in different continents and different regions. Cloud's not one cloud, and I think that's a realization which you do, which is for us it's important that we design and we support thinking all of those different dimensions. So again, it's evolving, but more important is pay attention to the market trends, pay attention to where the clients are in the journey, and don't design something which is too far to what they need and too behind where they were. So that's kind of how I would respond to what you just asked.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great comment, Manish, because oftentimes you also hear the same sentiment from ISVs that depending on the customer persona, they need to manage all kinds of versions and formats and infrastructures that can support the applications. And in many ways, that's a little bit of a cost-heavy item for the ISV to maintain a whole lot of products and supporting infrastructure underneath that. And I think, Chris, you and I have spoken exactly on this a few times in the past, right? And I know that at Kofax, you've been taking both the business model transformation approach as well as the technology transformation approach, going from subscription then to eventually thinking of SaaS. Do you want to talk to our audience about what prompted that sort of thinking and what's the customer insight behind choosing that kind of a strategy to SaaSify your products?
Yeah. First, Praveen, I would love to talk to the audience about it. Second, what's been really interesting is listening to my colleagues here, all the way from talking about where Sandeep identified some macro trends, to hearing about speed, to hearing about partnerships within an ecosystem and how important that is. The reason why we basically have taken our both business model transformation approach as well as our product modernization approach is that our customers aren't necessarily asking for cloud. Our customers are demanding outcomes. Yeah. And cloud becomes sort of a path to achieve that outcome. And so it's a byproduct of what we have to deliver to remain sort of relevant and competitive in the modern day market. A fully 50% of S&P 500 companies that existed 20 years ago are out of business today. And that's because of this digital disruption that is only accelerating. And so because of that, we've really used that as our greatest motivator for us moving to the cloud, both in sort of protecting the base while positioning for the future. And what that means is that as we modernize, we can't disenfranchise or marginalize our existing global install base, so our customers that have been with us for decades, while also helping them move forward and then also catering to this newer generation. And so I think that's where customers simply want ease of use. They're tired of complex, lengthy implementations that require these long-term, expensive system integrator support approaches. Our customers desire cost optimization, but it's not the primary driving factor now. They know that they need to be relevant. So revenue lift opportunities are just as important as cost optimization when investing in automation and AI. And then I think lastly, and I think this gets to sort of the balance between CapEx and OpEx. So CapEx, significant upfront outlays, whereas SaaS really drives more subscription. So you're able to pay on an annual basis or a monthly subscription fee. But customers need business impact as quickly as possible, because I think everybody now is charged to drive value. And I think that time to value matters more than ever as businesses race to digitally transform. And we've all talked about COVID really accelerating that. That's exactly what we've seen in our sort of customer base globally, is that speed to value matters more than almost anything, but it matters within the context of digitally hardening their business model, because business moats of the early 2000s are gone because you've had a lot of experience in your industry. Let's say you've been in financial services for the last 50 years, where you would think that experience would create that business moat that you could rely on to ward off the competitors. That's no longer the case. You have startups now that are able to have the reach and the impact because they do not have this legacy or heritage estate that they need to modernize. And so they're able to reach a lot further and have greater impact based on they have a blank slate and they're using automation and AI to really create that impact in those personalized services. So all of that points to that's why cloud is important to us, because it helps us achieve those outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I can totally relate to it because Shopify as a company announced their fiscal results today, and it was very surprising for me to note that they're already #2 e-commerce company in the US after Amazon, and they did about $90 billion of GMV just last year, right? And exactly to your point, right, where they leveraged digital technologies purely for outcomes and not really as a cost-saving phenomena, and that's kind of very visible in the way they've progressed as a business, right? And with that, I think it's a good way to bring in Mauro here, who represents Vista, which is one of the world's largest software-focused private equity firm. Mauro, how critical is this aspect that Chris talked about, which is cloud and linkage to outcomes, right? In your assessment of the companies that you invest into or the companies that you keep in your portfolio, right? How important has been, because you manage only software companies, give us a little bit perspective in terms of what's the role cloud is playing in the portfolio that you look at today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, listen, it's in a little bit more echoing what Chris mentioned. As we think about the cloud, I mean, ultimately you're thinking about the value you bring to your end customers, right? So if you look at our, as our philosophy in backing, ISVs, ultimately you're looking at, hey, how we bringing value and continue to increase that value that your end customers, get from your solution. From there, you come down from there and look at, how to kind of, build your platform that enables that, and that comes, pretty much across, all the discussions that we have had here, around, building agility, right? So it's clear that, if you have a cloud-based implementation, and the right infrastructure in place, or like Mike said, the right team in place, especially, right? You can actually deliver, products quicker to the market, right? Bringing new features, new functionalities more often, right? The idea of, when I started, many years ago, we had yearly releases, right? If you're lucky, and today, we release almost every day. So the cloud platforms enables us to do that, right? But that journey is obviously lengthy, right? From our perspective, as we think about, as the companies that we invest in, obviously we want companies to invest in the cloud. So some of them are very early in their journey, right? And we kind of want to make sure that they bring the right resources, the right capability in-house to take advantage of that. I think, at a high level, we don't see the cloud transformation just as a, infrastructure as a service, migration, right? Or what some would call lift and shift, right? For the most part, I think, most of the lift and shift, strategies that I've seen, tend to fail, right? So we want to make sure that, we take the right approach when we look at that, right? And then, last, I would say, I'll reemphasize this, which I think is something that we continually see over and over and over, which is really the resource, knowledge, and experience within that transformation, but not only the transformation, but with maintaining and enhancing the platform, right? I mean, listen, the traditional skill sets that you have in your organization, running on-prem does not apply necessarily to the cloud world, right? And companies really have to invest in bringing new resources, reskilling their teams, right? And making sure that starting from there, right, you have the right set of knowledge and capabilities in-house, to be successful in your transformation, and ultimately kind of go from there. So we always kind of want to think about that and start from there. Got it.
It makes a lot of sense. And picking up from what you said and what some of the earlier speakers said, Ash, we hear a lot of chatter around hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. Some say that this will fade out and people and companies will eventually gravitate towards a single hyperscaler, which will bring in every component together. A lot of people say that tech is going to increasingly get commoditized, so it doesn't really matter, right? Who do you work with? It's the outcomes that will matter and the business models that will matter, right? So what's your view? Because that's one question we get asked from a lot of ISV customers, right? Should they think of multi-cloud as a long-term strategy, or is multi-cloud a short-term, quick fix strategy to win customers today? What's been your read of the market?
It reminds me of an article. There was a gentleman named Nicholas Carr. Somebody might remember, maybe 20 years ago, maybe even 25 years ago, he had an article that said that IT is becoming a commodity. That was a long time ago, an HPS article. And, we're still waiting for that. And that's a reality. And on-prem, we used to have Red Hat Linux as a platform. We had Windows as a platform. You had AIX as a platform. You had HPUX as a platform. All of these, and mainframe as a platform. All of these are realities of on-prem. Why people would expect it to be different in cloud is a mystery. Right? The reality is multi-cloud, hybrid cloud is here to stay. Now, remember, I think the theme was pretty simple. It was speed and agility. If you have workloads, if you have use cases that align with those, you'll probably go to the cloud. If you have a proprietary process, whether it's for security reasons, or if you have a proprietary application, it has to stay on-prem because it is way too expensive. And more importantly, if it's an application that doesn't require speed and agility, which actually quite a few of them we do have, it's just impossible to go to a cloud. So I think those are the factors you think about. So as an ISV, multi-cloud is important because your customers want it to be a multi-cloud. Nobody's going to be locked in, and this assumption there's going to be single hyperscaler, I think is a myth. And the assumption that it's going to be cloud only is a myth, and we just have to be prepared. And I think for those ISVs who've gone through this process from on-prem, it's pretty natural for them to say, yeah, these are cloud platforms that need to be supported in multiple fashions. Something Mauro pointed out, though, it is a fundamental shift of the entire company to make this happen. It's not just a bunch of engineering guys. It's your finance team has to change. Your HR team has to change. Post-sales team. And ironically, for the organization, the more it goes outwards facing, the harder the change is. The engineers are the easiest ones to change, right, as you go further. And so the ability to come back and have this it's not just a multi-cloud, it's also a complete attitude change, which is actually fundamentally really, really hard.
Got it. And Mike, your point of view, you are operating in this industry a lot more deeply. What's your read of the market?
Yeah, I mean, so Red Hat's stated strategy and vision has been open hybrid cloud for 8, 9, 10 years. I mean, that really has been, essentially the tagline, the very core essence of what we're trying to achieve. So in a way, we've made a pretty significant bet and investment that this is that open and hybrid and multi are kind of the ways of the world. And if you look at what we're trying to do with OpenShift and how it builds on Kubernetes and pulls in a number of other open source technologies to create a flexible and malleable and adaptable platform that spans different underlying infrastructures, whether it's existing investments in on-premises infrastructure that enterprises have made, whether it's incorporating one or several hyperscalers, whether it's incorporating even boutique cloud infrastructure offerings. The point there really is to provide that adaptive layer that allows workloads and basically the applications that are driving business outcomes to be run on whatever underlying infrastructure or combinations of infrastructure makes sense. So we're all in on it. Basically, if it doesn't turn out that way, we're going to have to resort to selling T-shirts or something. But this is where we're going.
Hey, Mike. And so Praveen, I hope you don't mind, but Mike and Ash couldn't agree more. And if you, so I don't think you're gonna have to turn to selling T-shirts, by the way. Flexera put out their 2020 State of the Cloud report, like 3 or 4 months ago. And what they came to, the realization was that 93% of enterprises have a hybrid multi-cloud strategy. And it just makes sense as you think about the CRMs, the ERPs, the HCMs. I mean, use all the acronyms you want, but all of these different strategic applications that enterprises need to do their mission, to accomplish their mission, those come in various shapes and sizes. And so this has been, they have innovated and invested their way in terms of the enterprises, innovated and invested their way into this hybrid multi-cloud environment. They didn't ask for it. And so now the challenge becomes, how do I manage this hybrid multi-cloud environment? And so I think you're going to start to see a tremendous amount of maturation around managing these global transactions across these various applications where a transaction may start in terms of how it comes into the organization through a CRM, but then it needs to go into an ERP because there's a financial aspect to it. And then maybe there's a people aspect. So it needs to go into a Workday type HCM application. And this needs to be connected. And so I think the challenge now becomes for 2021 forward, how do we manage this hybrid multi-cloud environment? It's already there. And so now how do we manage it? And I think as an ISV, what we owe our customers is what I think, Mike, you were talking about, which is we have built ours and we made the decision in 2018. So we haven't made quite the lengthy investment that you guys have, but we did say in 2018 that we were going to invest in making our entire intelligent automation platform, all the way from our RPA to our BPM, fit for a hybrid multi-cloud environment, which meant that with a one-click script, they can containerize any module or the entire platform and deploy it to their cloud of choice. And so this starts to develop that digital connectivity or that connective tissue amongst this hybrid multi-cloud environment because it's already here.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that point, Chris, though the counter argument there always has been, and I want to bring Manish onto this, right? The problem happens when you have globalization on the other side, right? Because you are taking functions, all kinds of functions across the world, right? You are using different locations. Even a single process is being split into different locations from an execution standpoint, right? And that's when the whole capabilities, the whole talent pool, like Mauro talked about, skills, right? Just managing it in a distributed environment is so much more difficult, and which is where the school of thought is that, look, if we are on one platform, which is scaled up and which has all capabilities, it might be easier to manage from a skills and capability perspective. So Manish, I know you have been dealing with this exactly as a problem statement in your company. What are your thoughts on this, and what are the best practices you have followed there?
Yeah, I think, it is extremely important that there are two aspects. One is a technology aspect, and second is the business model and what's happening in the industry aspect. So if you look at every cloud infrastructure provider, this whole industry is evolving and everybody is trying to find a niche. in finding a niche. Some are getting into strategic partnerships. Some are getting into investment partnerships. And I think if you're a software provider to a wide variety of segment, you need to make sure that you don't get boxed in. And then if you start adding layers and layers, there are some cloud vendors who are more strong in machine learning, some are more strong in security, some are more strong in Asia Pacific. You go and sell something in China, it's a different preference. You get something in India, it's a different preference. So what becomes really, really important is, and I agree, I think, there is definitely a cloud vendor and a cloud agnostic and a hybrid approach you can do in the design and architecture. But at the same time, you really need to figure out how do you play where you don't get boxed in. And cloud vendor and the choice of cloud and your strategy also becomes a business strategy where things could work. I do feel in future there's going to be more and more verticalization of cloud offerings. There would be telecom clouds and banking clouds and retail clouds, and as the maturity would happen, because the fundamental infrastructure and the fundamental things would become common commodity across the players. So the question is, how do you then differentiate? And eventually, I think every one of us talked about that business outcome, and business outcomes are two. One is bottom line, and second is at the top line. And eventually, it's going to be a math equation which has to fit in those three things. So again, there's not a right answer, but I do believe, and Oliver is on this call, I think we both agree that as a software vendor, you need to provide and make sure that your architecture and your technology, whether it's microservices or API and scalability, is really, really designed at the bottom of things so that you can kind of maneuver as the industry is maneuvering.
Got it. No,
hopefully that
I think that's a great perspective. I think one of the other questions that we keep getting asked, and this is more on the infra side and less on the app side, right? In terms of cloud being truly ROI positive, right? And this has been one of the major concerns. I mean, if you talk about vendors, they will all have these fancy modelers which will show a net positive outcome of cloud, but in reality, is cloud's ROI measured more in terms of speed and agility and the outcomes thereof, or purely from a dollar to dollar cost perspective, is doing things on cloud cheaper compared to doing things on-prem? So Chris, I don't know, you are in that journey. So what's been your read so far, and what's your advice to people who are in the similar confusion zone?
Yeah. So we're a private equity owned company. So the cost equation does matter because there's a bottom line to drive to, as well as top line growth number that we need to hit. So what I would say is that we take all of that into account. The predictions on future scalability, obviously the unit economics are more favorable as you scale. And so I think you really need to understand your product market fit to have the levels of confidence that you need in your future projections to make your current dollars fit the investment thesis. And so it is a rather complicated sort of equation, but I like to pull on three simple, sort of almost like a Venn diagram, where you've got experience, intuition, which I think enough of us here have enough gray hair to where we can check those boxes. But where I think sometimes we lack here is around the data. And that's the third piece that really needs to be pulled into the equation. So those three sort of really fit into and help us develop our business model. So again, not a one size fits all, but there is a common approach where we've mitigated the risk to make sure that the decisions that we make today stand the greatest probability of success.
Got it.
If I could jump in, Chris, yeah. I'd love to hear how you take into account and how you value increased innovation, the improved speed, not just of taking an idea to market, but the speed with which you can generate new ideas, because you've got a sort of richer trial and error type of environment in which to experiment.
Yeah, so first mover advantage, I think sometimes can be overrated. I think sometimes you do want to be close enough to watch that first mover advantage so that you can learn the mistakes that they've made and quickly innovate and leapfrog. And so I'll give a good example. So I led the RPA practice for Deloitte before coming over to Kofax. Kofax had an RPA, made an RPA acquisition. But I made the decision when we landed here that we weren't going to be an RPA only focused company. We were going to leapfrog the RPA focus because realizing that it was going to be a component of a larger integrated automation platform, almost like Excel, our macros are to Excel, right? Macros were amazing at first, but then they just became table stakes components of Excel, and people bought Excel, not bought macros. And so we're seeing the same thing play out in terms of the investments that we're making in cloud. So are we going all in on SaaS? No, we're not, because SaaS has a tremendous product market fit, but there are also cloud, I would say not even cloud native, but cloud enabled applications and platforms that make sense, that can leverage the cost optimization of outsourcing the infrastructure, but you can keep the data where you need it to be secure in your network or on-prem. And so we do take that variability into consideration when making these decisions. So again, it's sort of situational dependent.
Yeah.
I know we are.
I think
yeah.
Just to add, I think Mike raised a good point about innovation. And I think there's another point about deployability, is how fast can you actually get the value to your clients. So that's why I think this whole ROI on cloud, if it is just a me too equation, it's difficult to justify, but it's never a me too equation, because one, it's speed of innovation. Second, it's how fast can you actually deploy and get value to the client. Those two variables are very difficult to measure because it's, I'm sure Sandeep knows, or every one of us knows, that we can't really commit what we may get in the next 3 years, but it's important enablers just to keep in mind.
So Mauro, from your portfolio perspective, what's been the aggregate outcome? Is it ROI positive? How do you measure some of it? What's your insight there?
Yeah, no, absolutely positive. Part of it is like Chris mentioned, right? I mean, you're not making a commitment, right, to make a significant transformation, thinking about the business today, right? You're looking in the future, right? So in the future, as you look, 3-5 years from today, right? And you look at the value you bring into your customers and the cost base of your product, right? The cloud, if done well, can demonstrate significant scalability, reliability, performance, and agility into the platform, right? Which ultimately drive the results, right? If you have a short-term view, I don't think we can ever make an ROI work from that perspective, right? But then the last point I'll say is also, again, going back to what Chris mentioned and Mike was talking about, innovation, right? Is about unlocking the potential about those organizations, right? And how they continue to innovate on their products and, building new features, new functionalities, or even new products, right, on top of the platform, right? I think the last thing I'll say is probably, too much for a discussion today, but, it's really about, shifting from product to platform, which is also something that is, sometimes not perceived as necessarily like, hey, we're not releasing a new product, right? But you're locking significant value underlying on the, the product and the company itself, right? That also comes into play here.
Awesome. I think we're running out of time, but Mike, very quickly, I think there's an audience question in terms of the top 3 components of a cloud program. So what's your advice on that? What should be the top 3 considerations for cloud?
Well, I guess it really falls back to the basics of you've got the technology, you've got the architecture of how you put that technology together, and then you've got the people. You've got expertise, you've got organizations, you've got chemistry among different individuals and sets of individuals. And I think to maximize your likelihood of success, you need to take all of those dimensions into account and treat them holistically. There's no magic bullet. You can't just buy a particular piece of software and install it and it magically transforms you into an agile cloud native, microservices based, pick all your buzzwords, successful organization, right? You've got to have all of those pieces be commensurate. So that'd be the first and most fundamental advice I'd give is consider those 3 dimensions together in a holistic way.
Got it. Awesome. Well, it's been a great discussion. 30 minutes is always a small time to cover such a vast topic, but I really appreciate all your insights. I think there was some good call outs, good best practices. So thanks for sharing all of it. And we would continue with our sessions. I'll pass it back to Prankur to introduce the next panel. But thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Praveen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Praveen, and all the panelists. I think the perspective shared were very intriguing, and they gave a lot of food for thought to ISVs who would be in the different stages of the journey towards cloud. And quickly, I think without much ado, I want to introduce the second roundtable of the day. We will have 4 practitioners here who have first-hand experience of driving large-scale cloud programs at their respective organizations. So while it's coming up, just stay glued to your seat, and we'll be with you shortly.
Today, organizations must accelerate their journey to become a digital enterprise. Not only to deliver new levels of efficiency, differentiation, and growth, but to survive. With over 12,000 technology and industry experts located around the world and over 30 years of software engineering leadership, we are Persistent, a global solutions company delivering digital business acceleration and enterprise modernization. We imagine new experiences, revenue streams, and business models for a fully digital world. We engineer tomorrow's products and platforms for enhanced agility and growth. We modernize applications and processes to maximize resiliency. And we manage operations and systems to reduce costs and facilitate growth. We do this all by leveraging our expertise and the latest technologies, including cloud, AI, and automation. Our boutique mindset and enterprise scale, combined with a diverse, open, and innovative partner ecosystem, provide significant flexibility to our clients. We bring together our services, partner capabilities, and industry accelerators to build the right solutions with faster time to market and greater value. We are the industry leader in customer excellence, completely committed to your success. We are Persistent. Get started with us now.
In the upcoming session, as described aptly by the title, we will hear about how enterprises are adopting cloud to realize the vision around speed, flexibility, and anti-fragility, and unlocking the business value with cloud as the foundational technology. I would like to invite our esteemed panelists, Oliver Chang, VP Product Development at Diebold Nixdorf, Angela, who's the VP of Information Technology, Workplace Employee Experience at Honeywell, Dan Phillips, who's the ex-CTO at Hulu and currently the Managing Partner at Blue Spear Ventures, and finally Ashish Agarwal, Senior Director, Enterprise Data and Analytics at Ally Financial. The session will be moderated by Neeta, who's the SVP Cloud and Infrastructure at Persistent Systems. Passing it over to you, Neeta.
Thank you, Prankur, and a very warm welcome to to our panelists today. A very insightful discussion in the first half, and jumping on to to the enterprise part of the panel. Now that you've done the introductions, Angela, maybe we'll start with you, and heard a lot of some trends on from a cloud strategy perspective. But if you could throw some light on what has, how customer demands have dictated your cloud journey at Honeywell, that would be great. And if you could also let the audience know as to since this is a set of practitioners, who in your organization is driving that change, whether it's driven by business, whether it's driven by IT. Angela?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nita. Thank you for this opportunity. And that panel that you guys had before was great. That's going to be a hard act to follow, but we're going to beat this one. So I think the kickoff question is great, right? Because again, I think I'm going to tie it together to a couple of comments, right? So Sandeep made a great comment about being cloud, being smart versus faster, right? So I think no IT organization goes into this going, oh, I'm going to deliver cloud, but you're going to drive this with business value. You're looking into how are you accelerating? What are you modernizing? What's the fastest way to deliver business value? And that's exactly what we've been doing in Honeywell, right? So Honeywell is a industrial company, everybody knows it, but what you also don't realize is we're a company in motion, we're a company in transformation. We're driving a lot of industrial software transformation within Honeywell. So both from an IT as well as a business organization, there's a lot of due diligence going into how do we deliver exceptional customer experiences? How are we going to deliver employee experiences so that we make employees more productive? So it's all about business growth, great, but it's also about how do you drive it with architecture? How do you drive it with data? How do you get the insights out of the data so that you can drive this end-to-end customer journey, if you will, or a employee journey, if you will. So I think short answer, Nita, it's both, right? IT and business both are driving it, but we're not driving it going over this goalpost going, we need cloud. We're like, what are we trying to achieve? We have different, with IT only, like we've got different strategies, I guess, in place. And we say, hey, we want to transform the employee experience, or we are trying to, drive the end-to-end customer journey. And even with the year that you think about where we're coming from COVID and the pandemic, Honeywell traditionally was not a work from home company. And overnight, I think I heard this earlier today as well in your forum, how we had to pivot to granting everybody work from home and laptops and the experience around it. We had to onboard people without laptops. So, hey, that escalated our journey into the VDI cloud, right? How do you make employees productive? We started looking at how our selling motions and our marketing motions, and how do you take the data and tie everything together, and which part of that cloud will enable so that we can drive faster growth, right? So at the end of the day, it was stitching it together. It was taking a lot of the analytics, taking a lot of the solution that we were going to drive, and really figuring out, like, if cloud can, bring us value faster, let's go with that. But it was never about, hey, cloud is the only way to do it. Yes, we still have some legacy, ERPs and things like that, which will always be there. But I think that's our phase 2. So now that, we're sort of in this journey of this year of execution now of all the strategies that we have, I think ERP will eventually come, maybe the HR platforms will come and things like that as well. But driving customer intimacy, driving the customer productivity is, I think, front and center, and both IT and business are partnered for that.
Thank you, Angela. That was very insightful. And speaking about trends, Dan, if you could comment on, how streaming, we all know that streaming has revolutionized, that industry cloud has actually revolutionized that industry. So can you speak to us a little bit about your experience on how critical this transformation has been, at your most recent organization?
Sure. And, I'm going to build a little bit on Angela there, as I think she had it exactly right. It really starts with those business objectives and what we wanted to accomplish as an organization. If I look back, streaming, of course, there's big movement, scalability, all of those things are very important. But we knew, and we really started our full cloud journey about 2.5, 3 years ago. And we needed to be able to scale. We were not quite 20 million, we're 40 million subscribers, going to 60 or 70 million. We had a fledgling live service. And today we're the #1 over-the-top live provider. So you're talking about all of these scalability. We wanted to differentiate ourselves by providing choice. So you start with these whole set of what we needed to accomplish from a business strategy, and then the technical strategy and the cloud strategy really fell out of that. And things like that, all the speakers before and now are talking about, that agility, that ability to move, all these things that we want to accomplish and features and capabilities, we're going to be half right. And we know we're going to have to pivot without even knowing that COVID was going to hit us. And so all of this, came into, and as we thought about putting together, and that's what really, drove that strategy for us. So that was the start. Your question about who drove that, we set business objectives, we set even business OKRs around this that permeated the broader organization. Of course, the technology and product organizations were leaders in this, but it's an integrated effort that we put together. And as and this all fit in, we needed to think about, I think other speakers have talked about, it's not just that lift and shift. It's rethinking about your architecture. We also incorporated this move from a container strategy to Kubernetes as part of it from a technology standpoint. We looked at how we use microservices. You can even make microservices become a monolith depending on how you architect it. So we need to rethink all of those aspects as well. And this is what really came together and drove the strategy for us.
Thank you, Dan. And you touched upon certain outcomes, but just keeping with the panel, let me move to the financial side of the world. And in the previous panel, I heard Chris speaking about first mover advantages or disadvantages, right? I call that the consequences of early adoption. Ashish, do you want to comment on adoption in your industry, in the banking and financial services industry?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question, Nita. Cloud adoption for the global banks and financial services funds in general has seen an uptick and a rise in the past few years. But as we have heard other speakers say, it has further been bolstered by the wave of digitalization brought on by the global pandemic. So in keeping to the topic of today, the value chasm the financial services companies are bridging are kind of going from using cloud as a cheaper or a faster alternative to an on-premises data storage to leveraging cloud technologies to drive business performance and shareholder value. So the shift in this motivation can be attributed, if I can think of a few reasons, I would say 4. One being operational efficiencies, which comes out to be the more obvious ones naturally. Things like operational stability, platform resiliency, scalability, right? After all, resiliency and protection from maintenance issues or outages are the top priorities for financial services customers and companies. So cloud enables the ability to respond for us quickly to physical outages and disruption. Like recently, we had this major thunderstorm in Texas like yesterday and even today. Many of the data centers of companies are getting affected due to that. So having options where your data has been replicated elsewhere in other regions, other parts of the world, gives you that flexibility and enables your customers to see no impact when such issues occur. The second category I will call out is the more relevant one, and that's a big one for us, that is business agility and innovation, right? Because in that, having to not waste time in managing infrastructure, you can direct your resources and people towards achieving business goals, achieving innovation and spending time on that. So leading cloud providers, as we know, they offer like array of these products as a service model. And then banks are able to leverage those to implement new business and operating models and increase, such as to increase customer insights, contain costs, market relevant products, and delivering those quickly. So it's no surprise, and I think this came up as well, like challenger banks are starting straight on the cloud and are able to drop right in and compete. And in some sense, you can think of financial services, banking becoming a commodity, right? So how do you differentiate, right? So because of that, you've got to keep up with the market and keep up with that only through innovation that is enabled through the cloud ready technologies. Now, the other relevant piece is how do you consolidate? And because the cloud is increasingly becoming a place or a choice of technologies where you can consolidate enterprise data assets. It gets interesting now because once you get all the data in that one location, maybe not physically, but at least virtually, you can unlock a lot of the organizational silos and drive insights and truly treat data as an asset. And once you start doing that, now you really open the floodgates on innovation in driving business value, in driving customer experience through advanced analytics and solve all kinds of problems. And the final one, which I would say, and what I'm personally passionate about, is it improves employee engagement. It's a whole new way of doing work. And it's about sharing your skills and abilities in a shared platform, in a shared environment, and then collectively drive both business and technology forward.
Thank you, Ashish. That was useful. Oliver, would you want to weigh in on this topic of the transformation in the financial services world? And obviously, if you can also add to it on, there are still workloads that are on traditional infrastructure, traditional architecture. So how does the roadmap transform?
Sure. Thanks, Nita. Building on kind of what the team has said and Ashish especially, right? What we're seeing is basically, and I think the previous panel, what we're seeing is leveraging the cloud for the purpose of part cost, but really enabling faster innovation and being able to open the ecosystem. So one of the things that we're trying to solve for with our customers and partners is the end-to-end customer journey. So it's no longer one company's play. It's now, if a customer wants to start, example in the banking space, a customer during COVID, a lot of branches closed up, you have to be able to offer.
Did we lose you, Oliver?
Does look like it, yeah.
Okay, just I'll lose me. Maybe I'll move on to, maybe we lost Oliver, and while he comes back, Angela, we spoke about trends, adoption and some outcomes, some very interesting outcomes. Moving on to strategies to migrate to cloud, right? Oliver, are you back?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Sorry, I had to go to a backup power. Lost a little bit of power. Sorry, apologize. So basically, the enablement of being able to do, for example, video, right? So what we're enabling our customers is delivering solutions that are able to run both. So hybrid is key. Able to run both on the cloud or on their data centers or a private reserve of some kind on a public cloud provider. Because to your point, especially in financial services, we're seeing this capability where we peeled a lot of the onion, employee enablement, CRM, marketing solutions. And what's happening is as we get inside kind of the onion, so to speak, the highly regulated, high security requirement capability, some are able to look at software as a service provider. So we've seen an increase in banking platform as a service providers. But there are a lot of other workloads that, especially for really big banks, are going to stay on premise for a little while longer. And the key challenge there is going to be, but they don't want to lose out. So I think Dan kind of spoke about, the architecture. So what we found is the ability to containerize things, the ability to do microservices has enabled us using cloud techniques and enabling them to run the workload wherever they would like, has enabled us to speed innovation. We work with several tier 1 banks that we've been able to make payments system related changes, which used to take minimum 90 days, maybe 6 months in a few days, right? Because what you're changing is in a monolithic application. It's basically a small set of a microservice component. So I think that's one of the key things in financial services is cloud-driven technologies are not only interesting because it's enabling SaaS providers, it's not only interesting because it's enabling them a way to move their workload and move faster in some digital spaces, but the architectures that the cloud has provided us is enabling them to, even on-premise, get some of that speed of innovation. And I think that's kind of the way we're approaching it.
Thank you, Oliver, and that's why hybrid, but thank you. Angela, just moving on to our next next topic of discussions on strategies for cloud migration. Right? Would you want to throw some light on what strategies you have adopted and why from a cloud migration perspective?
So, let me answer this in maybe a use case example of how we've done it, right? So one of the examples I think we use very often in Honeywell, and we're sort of using it, and it's not even a Honeywell example, it's actually a United Airlines example. So if you are premier users of United, you have the United app, that app will let you book like a trip for 4 for like, an international within 4 or 5 minutes. It's not going to ask you anything. It has all this information. So it's literally using the data as maybe a digital currency, right? And that it's not their IT team or NSI vendor or somebody woke up and wrote up an app about it, right? What they did really was they've and again, I'm just like, they're dissecting that app, but their marketing team and their sales team and their, anybody who brings that experience together has threaded the data together and said, hey, Angela has, this is her number, this is her credit card, this is the seat she likes to sit in, and this is her preferred route. So every time I'm booking, it's becoming more intelligent, and that's sort of that's the experience we're going after. So when we decide that there's a customer journey end to end in Honeywell that we want to drive, that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to figure out how are we threading that in there. A customer and they bought one piece versus another piece of Honeywell equipment, can we do cross-sell, can we do upsell? What parts of that will exist faster? Let us innovate, let us accelerate, grow faster in the cloud. And surprisingly, a lot of it, it gets stitched together and it's a multi-cloud journey, but it looks amazing in the end when it comes out because the customer doesn't know about it. The intricacies are hidden, but that experience that they offer that comes in. So I think from a migration strategy, you have to be planful about it. You have to prototype. You have to experiment with a few tools and figure out what's the best option. But at the end of the day, it's the value that you're providing, I think.
Sure, thank you. And Ashish, would you like to weigh in on this topic as far as strategies for cloud migration?
Yeah, sure. So a key value proposition of cloud is that it offers the ability to fully abstract and automate the infrastructure through software or infrastructure as code. However, the journey is not as smooth. Things can actually get worse before they get better at times. And so it's largely the inhibitors that we deal with could be around untangling out of the current state complexity, figuring out and migrating out of the migration strategy that you come up with needs to balance the speed of innovation along with without breaking any existing processes. You typically hear about this airplane strategy that you example or analogy rather. you're changing the engine while the plane is in flight, right? So, traditional banks, typically they're saddled with a lot of their disparate legacy systems, and the idea of driving change to the IT infrastructure can be quite daunting, right? So on the other hand, they could have even invested millions of dollars and modernized parts of the technology stack. So if you really think about it, the migration strategy needs to consider how do you balance it completely where you actually achieve the goals and the outcomes that you're after, which is the value of agility, the speed, yet be able to prove results incrementally, right? Because you can't move too fast. You have to go incremental because there is so much to deal with. Various other challenges come on the way along with it, like this thing about cultural resistance to automation. Like this, still people think about that automation is going to marginalize some of the value of IT that currently being provided by people. So it's a mindset change that you have to deal with. And that is something that I believe financial services or other companies all have to kind of grapple with and adopt at some point. And then we got to be real, right? There's got to be the skills that you need. And, these skills are very tough to find in the market. And cloud expertise. Beyond that is also understanding of the business. So the game has changed tremendously. It's no longer about, can I just work in the guts of the application and make it work? But it's also about how can I actually bring business value, understanding what business solution we are trying to create.
Well said, Ashish. Thank you. Speaking about cultural resistance, and in the interest of time, Dan, would you want to, enlighten us about organizational change, cultural changes that you had to go through as you adopted, you had to adopt as you went through this transformation journey?
Sure. Ashish, you're exactly right. It's a mental or mindset shift and it's not just, as we've all said, not just in the technology, but it's for the organization and helping the whole organization understand that. The getting the expertise in-house is a challenge, and it was for us. We had to, we hired into it, look for expertise. We use consultants and the partners that we were working with, and an extensive training that we employed as well. And not just technology training, organizational training, business process training, DevOps, looking at this holistically was really important for us. But that culture shift that you're talking about, we step back and it's important to not keep this as an adjunct. But how does this fit in with your overall development and organizational culture, and making sure that that's a part of it? And so we spent the time at looking at our development methodologies and how does that shift, and how do we bring people along, and making that mindset shift. We embedded it as part of our, we use OKRs as part of it, and all down throughout the organization. It was a part of key objectives that we embraced. And again, all the way down into making sure your leadership understand not just the execution and the steps and having this cohesive plan, but having those leadership, culture, business meetings. How does this all fit together holistically? I guess my message overall is to not keep this as a side thing, but it needs to be fully integrated and thought through as part of your overall shift and development to your culture and organization.
Thank you, Dan. And what I'm going to do is we have two interesting questions from the audience. So we would pivot to challenges, which was anyway a part of my question to the panel going next. And the question from the audience is, what are the top 3 challenges that companies face as they transition to the cloud? And Oliver, I'll look to you to throw some light on that. I know Manish alluded to some aspects of security and compliance earlier in the earlier panel, but if you could respond to this question from the audience, that would be great.
Sure. I think the first one's the easy one. We've talked about it, skills. Both the provider providing that capability and the financial institutions themselves. So we've kind of come with, and I think Mike mentioned it earlier, the value of being able to containerize things is to hide and abstract some of that complexity, and so we can help them with that. I think the second big challenge we've seen is, as we've got into the inside of the onion, if I continue my metaphor there, is basically highly regulated, highly secure workflow. So, when we build out a cloud, and I've been in the financial services space quite a while, to be able to convince the financial institutions to allow us to run that workload, the level of securitization, network wrappers. So it's not just containers we're talking about. We're talking network knowledge and info security has become extremely important, right? So the gates and walls we've had to wrap around a cloud service that we're providing has been extremely high to be able to allow us to move that workload. The second thing is the ability to move around. One thing that we're seeing evolving, serving customers in both, my role, banking and retail around the world, is this rise of concern with data sovereignty. So a lot of places on the world have the rise of these regional or sometimes even national, local cloud providers. And so again, back to this one recurring theme we have is hybrid, is the ability to run your workload without having to maintain 6 versions of your product, and being able to put it where you need it. Because in some countries, some customers are going to look for that to be local because of all the different rules and regulations around the world.
Thank you, Oliver. And there's one more question that I would, throw out to the panel here so that we don't disappoint our audience. Are there any data migration best practices that need to be considered during cloud migration? Anybody wants to pick that one up?
Yeah, I'll take it. From a data perspective, I would say don't be in a rush to centralize everything in bulk, because data is generally and again, I'll use like the example of financial services companies, banks. They are essentially several companies under one banner. And if they have grown through acquisitions, as I describe it, then there is data that's going to be sitting in silos. And generally the tendency would be, let's see what's in there, let's take it out, put it in one place. That generally is not a viable option to begin with because of the financial investments that may have already been made. I mean, if you look at the landscape within companies like that, there are certain data silos that are old, others are maybe more modern. So I would say apply techniques like virtualization, for instance, where you're able to bring over data that is already in a, let's say, a local, on premises, for instance, or a certain robust, well-architected platform, and yet be looking at creating an enterprise warehouse, ideally on the cloud, which you can incrementally build into. So yes, you got to create the right seeding up front. So best practice is, in that sense, know your North Star, know where you're going. And if it's your enterprise warehouse or a data warehouse, then start there with the critical use cases there. Tap into additional well-architected sources in the interim to derive additional value out of them, and then gradually bring those on to a single place, if that still makes sense.
I think I would also add, like, to Ashish's point, don't be in a hurry, right? I mean, data is your currency at the end of the day. And organizations like, we'll have data sitting in silos, right? So how are you harmonizing those data models, and what sort of business rules are you applying to it? What cleanup? There's always going to be legacy. There'll be product data sitting in multiple places, or pricing. I think you have to also apply some data cleanup, and you have to apply, like, as you modernize your infrastructure, you also you have to look into strategies of, is that data that you have, is that going to scale for whatever you're deploying, right? So I think investing some time in your data strategy, as I think is a key architectural component, I would say.
Thank you, Angela. And I think we're almost up against time. For those questions that we haven't been able to answer, we will definitely get back to you offline, through the panel. But thank you for joining us today, and appreciate all the insights that you've shared with the audience. Thank you.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
Thanks, Nita, and thank you all the panelists. I think it was quite an interesting session with a lot of thought-provoking and enlightening perspectives being shared. I would like to once again thank all the speakers and attendees. And to conclude the event, I would like to invite Vaibhav back on stage. Vaibhav, over to you.
Thanks, Pankor. Am I audible? All right. So, when I was given the job to summarize whatever has been spoken today, I was actually initially worried about how I'm going to keep myself awake the entire time. But I think everybody was making such interesting points that my job was pretty easy. If you can see my screen, I've jotted down quite a bit of stuff. Yeah. Are you able to see my screen? Okay. So from the software panel, I think there were a couple of very interesting insights. Speed and agility is the key. You don't have to fall in love with inertia when it comes to the entire cloud switch. Resource knowledge and experience is going to be very, very critical. While your engineers are the driving force, but your entire organization has to come forward in managing this transition. Right infra and right team are going to take you to places in terms of creating new products and features. But cloud is really the enabling technology underlying all of your digital transformation. And once again, when it comes to outcome, speed to value actually matters. The world is going to be more and more multi-platform and hybrid, and the connective tissue across these platforms is going to be critical. And when it comes to the ROI, you can't be short-term and you can't be short-sighted about it. Scalability, reliability, and the speed advantage actually trumps all the dollar expense that you do today. And lastly, cloud may not be the only thing that you need. Other technologies like automation, AI, and all of the other latest and greatest of digital transformation technologies, they need to come together, and cloud is the enabler to bring them together. From the enterprise side, there were again a lot of good, interesting insights. Pardon me if I missed some of those. But some of the key ones, key highlights were, when it comes to the overall growth and the entire transformation, the IT and business have to come together. The starting point is always business objectives, but then your entire product technology organization leading it from the front has to bring in the rest of the organization together. The value chasm that enterprises are now bridging is now fundamentally shifting from just being operational efficiency to and resiliency to innovation, agility, and modernization. And cloud is the whole new way of doing all of these. The ability to containerize, run microservices is bringing significant business advantage. Architecture that cloud provides is also enabling a lot of on-premise workloads to innovate faster, right? And when it comes to migration, prototyping is the key. You have to weigh in all of your options. Journey is not that smooth. You have to think about untangling out of your current state, and migrating strategy has to really be a balancing act between the speed of innovation and not breaking the current as-is scenario, right? And lastly, tackling cultural challenges and the mindset shift in your entire organization is a big challenge underlying the entire cloud transformation journey. So that's something that you need to watch out for. That's it from my side, and thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you the entire audience for making it so engaging, and we had a lot of questions that we couldn't answer. We would definitely love to relate to the panelists and come back to you. Thank you all the panelists thank you for your valuable time, and it was really wonderful to hear you out all. Thanks everyone.
Tech.